let's get into this. I guess there's, I was just saying yesterday that there wasn't a whole lot going on. Thank you so much for the small gut from First Spectre. Appreciate that, brother. But there wasn't a whole lot going on. It's the end of the year. People are less upset because it's holiday season. Things usually ramp down for, at least for my content, more, let's be honest, a little the tea, drama, commentary type of stuff, which I'm always prepared for. And then it starts picking up in January and whatnot. But we got something spicy. Hasan and Asmongold had a conversation. It's like 3.5 hours long. Don't think I'm getting through the whole thing. I imagine the first hour or so it's going to be pretty much the gist of the entire conversation. But Asmongold has a pretty spicy take. I've seen it. It's a little rough. But, I mean, let's do it, man. Let's get this going. So let's just start with... We're going to start with just the Asmongold take first on Twitter. And then we're going to get into the debate. So let's go.
If you want to consider a genocide as a systematic killing of a group of people, they have genocide built into Sharia law right now. So no, I'm not going...
Oh, it was interesting. I was looking into Sharia law yesterday, and apparently different cultures will have different interpretations of Sharia law. I don't know that genocide is necessarily inherently built into their law, but I will say that when it comes to... I live in a Western country, so I'm Roman Catholic, so I obviously am going to know more about Catholicism, growing up under Catholicism, than other religions. But I'll say that fundamentally speaking, realistically, any society, the closer that a society is to a religious government, we'll say, is a society that is more oppressive to its people. I love God and the concept of God, but the reality is that the Bible is not, or any religious text, is not really full of good. I mean, really, the Bible alone. I mean, this is, in our Bible alone, you are punished eternally for you're punished infinitely for a finite sin, right? Or rewarded infinitely for a finite good. And that in and of itself, I think we would say, is rather ridiculous. I mean, that's kind of insane. Making a mistake, but then forever, being punished for eternity. That is just fundamentally, I would say, an immoral practice. There are things like slavery, unfortunately, justified in the Bible. There's a lot of oppressions justified in different religious texts. Women are oppressed in these societies based on religious text, regardless of which one it is. Children as well. Arranged marriages that mostly disproportionately impact or negatively impact women or young girls. Religion tends to be at the center point of that. There's no age of consent in any religious text. It typically is when a woman goes on her period or a child really starts her period. That is when they are considered an adult. These are oppressive forces. I don't know much about Sharia law. I could be ignorant to that specific law. I probably am. Maybe it is more aggressive. But fundamentally, we have to start thinking for ourselves. We have to start thinking for ourselves a little more, and I think that's what God would want. So,
going to cry a fucking river when people who have genocide that's baked into their laws are getting genocided.
See, that's my thing. That's like, okay, let me just turn that off real quick. That's the thing that is, I think, extraordinarily disconnected. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I struggle with empathy for non-Western countries, and it's because in a lot of these non-Western countries, people aren't accepted based on, women are treated as less than, gay people are treated as less than, trans people are treated as less than, and children are treated as less than. Again, arranged marriages are abusive to children. It's just the reality of the situation. And so I struggle with societies where if my wife or my friends or my family, especially that were gay, were to go there, I struggle with having empathy for those societies. And I'm not going to lie, I struggle with empathy for Palestine. So from my emotional self, I'm not personally oh my God, this is horrible. I know it's bad, but I'm not personally oh my God, this is horrible. And I'm just freely admitting that because I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But justification of some form of a genocide or killing or anything, that's obviously way too over the line. I believe that's too crass. Because I also understand that, logically, that typically speaking, when a society has more abundance, they tend to have better moral values. It's easy to care about your neighbor and to be a little more intelligent when you have more basic needs met. Right? So I understand that if Palestine had more financial freedom and money, that they might be a better, country with better values and better morals. but I tend to generally side with Israel's right to exist. I mean, ideally, I think I'd like to. Well, I would like to see a two-state solution where Israel pays some form of reparations, or not even just Israel, just like the Western world helps Palestine rebuild, gain abundance, better education, because with better education also tends to come more intelligence and more emotional intelligence as well, right? So that's kind of like my general take. Yeah, thank you for the $2 from Joshua Kai. Oh wait, no, that's not your name. Is it Joe Kahai? Tell me how to say that again. You said it was yesterday. I forgot, but thank you. Hey, Papa, Skyrim or Elden Ring? I don't know. I haven't played either yet. We'll see. But anyway, let me finish Asmongold's hot take.
I don't give a fuck. They're terrible people. It's not even a question. It's crazy that people don't see it that way. They'd be doing the same thing.
What I think is interesting is that, like, from what I've seen, Asmongold seems like a pretty chill dude, but from what I've seen is that he seems to be leaning more and more into the Twitter audience as time goes on. And like Twitter audience, like Twitter is a toxic, insane cesspool. It's actually psychotic, and it's very like legitimately unfun racist. And I say unfun because like I like some edgy jokes, but they like legitimately hate groups of people. It's fucking psychopath shit. And the reason I say that is I think that Asmongold is like leaning into that too much, and his audience is like too much of that, and he's starting to just go into like this weird, like non-empathetic, like kind of moronic perspective. I really, that's what I kind of feel like. He's like, oh, he's like shifting too heavily into that audience.
And how much did they kill? As many as they can. They're not able to kill as many people as Israel because they don't have as many bombs and as many weapons.
There's probably a level of truth to that, yeah, for sure.
But if they did, they'd be doing the same thing.
That's probably also true.
That's it. Just takes enough. That's right. These people...
His mom was a huge QAnon? Wow.
People are not your allies. They are not the same as us. They come from an inferior culture that is horrible.
Jesus Christ. It's a little bit of tough work for Asmongold to be trying to say someone lives in an inferior culture, considering we just watched a video where he used to use a dead rat as an alarm clock when it got stinky in the sun. I think the biggest problem with this is that, like, I would generally agree that Western culture is better than every other culture because we're the freest culture, and there's things to criticize, but you're allowed to criticize them in Western culture. The problem is that when Asmongold's saying what he's saying, if I'm being charitable, would be like, oh, he's just having the same take I have, meaner. But to be uncharitable, I think a lot of people, especially some of those Twitter people, they could look at this as a dog whistle to say, like, see, Muslims are bad. And that's problematic, obviously. You know, I think that's the number one problem with this whole thing, is like the potential dog whistling, whether it's intentional or not, or the explicit dog whistling, whether it's intentional or not, is the problem, because you really shouldn't be communicating that, like, I don't know, it comes off as like, fuck these brown people. that's how I think a lot of the more racist members of his audience are going to interpret that. And I don't think it's unreasonable to say people, content creators especially, should be careful of the way that they're presenting themselves on the internet. I don't think it's a hot take to be like, hey, you know what, you should be careful of how you're talking. I don't think that that's a particularly high expectation of a content creator with millions of followers and views. So,
kills people for their identity, and it is directly antithetical to everything Western values stand for, and it is an inferior culture in all
Jesus
ways.
Christ.
It is that simple. No, I don't feel bad for them. I don't feel sorry for them. I don't care.
I wonder, like, what's the point of saying this? You know what I mean? Like, you knew the reception. You knew that people were going to be upset and, like, offended by the insensitivity of the take. Again, I said the same take, but, like, I think in a more sensitive way. That's not meant to upset. And I would be careful of content creators who say things in an intentionally provocative manner. Right? Because when they do that, like, I feel like this was almost an attempt of trying to have a base take for Twitter. Like, as a content creator, he was like, I want to have, like, a take that people on Twitter are going to be like, oh, yeah, Asmongold, you're fucking badass. And you might think I'm being silly, but, like, content creators have this frame of thought sometimes. I've been there before. You know, I've been there before when, like, my views are a little lower than my typical. Obviously, he's much more successful than me. And I'm like, oh, should I do something to shake it up? And, like, I have not done that in years because it's, like, it's not a good idea to do things to shake it up. You don't want that type of attention. Even if you get attention from it. Not all attention is good or positive or productive attention, and I've been valuing consistency. And so this is what this feels like to me. It feels like a hot take. This doesn't feel like kind of an educated, intelligent take. It feels like an intentional, provocative hot take for attention. So that was the end of that clip. Let's watch Hasan. Let's watch Hasan.
Not going to cry a river when people who have genocide that's baked into their laws are getting genocided. I don't give a fuck. They're terrible people.
What the? Ain't no way he's talking about Palestinians, right?
They'd be doing the same thing. And how much did they kill? As many as they can. They're not able to kill as many people as Israel because they don't have as many bombs and as many weapons.
That part is true, but again, the way he's expressing it is very, I think, it's very intentionally provocative.
But if they did, they'd be doing the same thing.
Oh my God, I hate this argument.
They would be. Like, that is the truth. You might feel they're more justified in their, fighting against Israel. Maybe that's true. Again, I think Israel has the right to exist. I'd like to see a two-state solution. It seems like Netanyahu is a insane person that would need to be ousted out of power before any reasonable metrics could be taken. I'm not 100% educated, but okay, sure.
Argument so much, bro. This is crazy. Holy. What is this? This is the full clip?
I think that argument is true, but using that argument to dismiss the entirety of Palestinian people is the problem. Like, to say that Palestinians are fundamentally bad because of this it's ridiculous.
Consider a genocide as
because that's what's being communicated.
A systematic killing of a group of people. They have genocide built into Sharia law.
Bro, oh my God, bro, oh my God. It's so funny because his analysis right here is the liberal analysis. When you scratch the surface of the average American over a certain age and why they are so blind to the obvious dynamic, the obvious inequalities, the obvious inhumanity of Israel's operations, they literally agree with this. They also think this. You only arrive at this conclusion after years and years and years of social conditioning that justify the war on terror, America's war on terror, and the unironic justifications for this war on terror required the dehumanization of Arabs and Muslims and every single person that lives in that part of the region. Because if you were to look at the situation and recognize that humans are being blown apart every single day so that America can secure oil fields in Iraq, you would go crazy. So you have to either, on the one hand, omit key details, but also every single time you cover the atrocities, have to make it seem like they are, worthy targets or collateral damage that is permissible. Why is it permissible? Because they're not really human beings.
Don't have as many bombs and as many
There's a level of truth to that, sure.
weapons. But if they did, they'd be doing the same thing. That's it. Just takes enough.
But this take is also correct. They would clearly be doing the same thing. I mean, they're using their own people as human shields. Let's be real. They're hiding their military infrastructure underneath hospitals and apartments and et cetera, et cetera. So it is very clear that they do have a quite low value of human life, unfortunately. And you could, again, argue that has to do with lack of abundance, but it is the truth. And especially frustrating because, I think that the better argument is the leadership, the Palestinian leadership, Hamas. They are rather abusive to their own people. They steal tremendous amounts of aid money. They have done so historically. I believe Hamas leaders are billionaires. They steal aid from their people, and they use that for themselves and to continuously fight Israel instead of actually trying to help their own people. So it's a very complicated topic.
That's right. These people are not your allies. They are not the same as us. They come from an inferior culture.
Asmongold, your co-owner of your organization, you are calling a person from an inferior culture. What are you doing? Log off the internet, stop reading Reddit, and go talk to some real humans, please. Holy shit.
That is horrible. It kills people for their identity, and it is directly antithetical to everything Western values stand for, and it is an inferior culture in all ways.
How much do we think Asmongold cares that they kill gay people, trans people, and women for their identity? I wonder how much... I truly ask, do you think Asmongold really cares about the inequalities in Palestine? Because listen, you know what? Maybe I'm not educated enough on his take, but I saw this motherfucker going on a meltdown because they added a woman into a fucking Japanese video game because it's unrealistic. When the same guy played, a gnome in World of Warcraft, and it's well, that's unrealistic. I'm not saying that those two things are completely compatible, but it kind of seems like you're trying to communicate to a certain audience. I don't know. How much does he care about that? Maybe I'm just way off base with this.
It is that simple.
Bro, this is straight up one-to-one what Nazi said about Jewish people, what the most right-wing approach to this conversation. This kind of attitude, American exceptionalism, literally is the same thing. You're just removing American exceptionalist sentiment that is baked into American society, Western superiority. You're just taking...
Yeah, I think that the West is superior. We have the best culture, so...
The thing...
But it's the lack of emotion and the lack of caring and the complete dehumanization of Palestinian people. That's the problem.
that shelters it and the thing that makes it like the norm. When you remove the outside patina, the skeleton remains. This is the skeleton. This is the bare bones, okay? This is the bare bones of the argument that like America is the best country on earth. When you remove
True.
the outside stuff that makes it, I guess, seemingly more
True and based.
more appropriate for liberal consumption, okay, in an otherwise liberal society, this is what you arrive at. I don't think, like, I think he popped off on this, not thinking that, like, this would be, there would be a lot of repercussions for this.
And you know what else is disgusting?
Yeah, I thought that he was going to get very positive feedback.
That people in the West that enjoy more privileges and freedom than anywhere else in the world romanticize their behavior or their lifestyle as anything other than barbaric.
This is what people think you say about Israel. I know. Like,
Well, it's because he kind of does. I don't want to get into his whole interaction with like, Ethan or anything, though. I don't really feel like fucking rehashing all the old shit where he's extraordinarily dismissive of like Palestinian people and doesn't even, he doesn't even recognize their right to like have their own state.
if you were to say this about Judaism, understandably and rightfully, you would get banned, and you should get banned. Like, if I were to ever say like, oh, Jewish culture is this way, I would literally be Adolf Hitler. Okay, it's fucking ridiculous. For the record, I don't believe that about Judaism, regardless of how much my psychopathic rabid haters try to claim.
Well, I mean, maybe then you need to learn to communicate better. So
I believe it.
I know plenty of Muslims that respect gays. Well, I'm not talking about Muslims. I'm talking about people in Palestine. The truth is that that's what they.
Dude, come on, dude. What? Palestinian culture as a whole? Dude, this is your brain on Reddit. This is your brain on Reddit.
Well, just to be clear, like, you can't be gay in Palestine. It's illegal to be gay. I mean, it's not culturally accepted. There is a devaluing of women and gay and trans people in Palestine and children. The age of consent is 18, but like arranged marriages are a massive problem in Palestine. Like a huge problem in Palestine. They typically lead young girls to be, pushed into abusive dynamics. So like, let's just be clear. Like there is issues. We don't have to dismiss everything. Like Palestine isn't like a great place to live or be. The culture is not particularly great. Again, it's not because of anything fundamental with the people, but like it is not, it is not the greatest place to live if you are a woman, gay, trans, or really even if you're a man, frankly. Thank you for the $2. Why does Hasan talk like that? He sounds like AI. Maybe he's gone to the next level of gooning here and he's just AI now.
If you don't interact with normal people, if you don't talk to people on a daily basis, and the only way that you're getting information from, your only outlet to the outside world is just simply Reddit, you arrive at this conclusion. It's like literally a vector of radicalization against Muslims, Islamophobia, and also specifically Palestinians. That's crazy. It's also additionally, I
don't think that it's Islamophobic to acknowledge that like non-Western countries tend to be more regressive because they're more religiously oriented, not because of the religion that they follow, but because they follow religion more closely in general. So all religions can be very regressive. So
ironic when we talk about LGBTQ support, because this community, like his community, hates gay people in representation and in like
that might be true, by the way. So he might have a good point there.
Video games. So what the that's the other part of this that I don't understand. It's like, oh, Western culture is so superior. We love the gays, except I throw a fit every time I see them in my video games. But it's bad when Palestinians, I have imagined an alternative reality when Palestinians also do that. And I hate it when they do that. Okay, Asmongold wants to talk. He said, hello?
All right, let's watch the conversation.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. All right, Asmon.
Okay.
Time to goon, baby.
In the interest of fairness, I want you to explain what you said that I saw in limited clips earlier today, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so basically, I find it to be really problematic that people put like a lot of virtue signaling, and I think it is virtue signaling, for people that are supportive for like trans rights and LGBT rights when they support countries that kill people and prosecute them for being LGBT. I think it's a huge problem, and I don't think you can have both of those things.
So when you were saying like Palestinians exhibit inferior culture that's barbaric, you were simply talking about the hypocrisy? Is that what it is?
If that's the case, then he could have said that. Because it is, I mean, this is a good thing to press him on. It's like, why express this take in this way? Why express this take in this way? Because, like, realistically speaking, and, like, I feel like if anybody was talking about Trump supporters like this, Asmongold would have had a fit, and he would have been like, oh, what are you talking about? It's like, but Trump supporters have very little value for gay and trans rights, and women's rights, frankly, specifically abortion rights. So, like, why this country? Like, what is it? The proportionality of their issue? Like, I'm curious. I'm genuinely curious, okay?
Yeah, pretty much. I do. And somebody in my...
So why not say that? Why not say, like, hey, I have struggled really caring for Palestinian people because of the oppression of gay and trans people. Why not be specific about that?
Chat said that you said that I thought Christian theocracy was better.
No, I didn't say that.
Oh, what a fucking surprise. Okay. Well, here's the thing, right? Yeah, go ahead.
I want you to like fully explain, because I want to understand everything that you mean beyond the hypocrisy, because like the hypocrisy version, or the hypocrisy in and of itself, is one thing that we can address. It's a super simple concept.
Well,
but I think there's always a broader point beyond hypocrisy, because online, hypocrisy in and of itself, or even the invocation of hypocrisy or perceived hypocrisy, is seemingly a more damaging thing than like actual material harm, right? Oh, this person is hypocritical, and that's like a very common fucking thing. Yeah. I'm sure you experience it on a regular basis as well. It doesn't really matter.
Most hypocrisy, I think, is derived from a misunderstanding that is often deliberate. I see it oftentimes with you. You've seen it with me. Everybody has it happen. It's extremely common on the internet.
It's the Andrew Tate phenomenon, right? Where people don't give a fuck about like what Andrew Tate may have done or may not have done, or all the shit that he has definitely done, right? And care more about like, you know, perceived hypocrisy. Usually they care more about that than anything else. So I don't really.
I think there's a Norm Macdonald clip about that. It was very good.
Yeah, I don't necessarily care about hypocrisy that much, but
epic Norm Macdonald drop there.
In terms of the hypocrisy of the matter, I can explain it to you.
Sure.
Number one, so in terms of LGBTQ acceptance, right, trans acceptance, queer acceptance, you find that to be, in the United States of America, in the wealthiest nation on earth, one of the most prosperous nations on the planet, to be to a certain degree like a fancy thing to advocate for, right?
I don't think that you have to be rich to advocate for LGBT acceptance.
No.
Thank you for the $5 from Taco Boy. In the battle between two streamer Mr. Stinky Man versus Lolcow Trust Fund Baby. Yeah, for sure.
That's not what I'm saying.
I don't know. Maybe Hasan will spit some facts here. So far, he doesn't seem to be doing too poorly.
Okay, what are you saying? Sorry.
No. What I'm simply saying is that LGBTQ representation in video games is oftentimes considered to be something that is like unnecessary. Or something that is
you're talking about like in games?
I thought we weren't talking about the hypocrisy argument. Then why are we going back to hypocrisy?
Games, in facets of culture and facets of media.
Yeah, sometimes it happens. It feels like it's inauthentic. Yeah, sure.
It can feel like it's inauthentic. Not all the time, though. I mean, it really just depends on how they do it, I guess. You know what I mean? Like, you'd have to give me an example of when it feels inauthentic.
Okay. Well, wait, is there a positive example of LGBTQ representation that you can think of?
I thought Fallout was great. You know what I mean? I don't think that every time you add an LGBTQ character, you need to make their story about being LGBTQ, generally speaking. Or rather, you know what the one thing is annoying? I think Star Wars does a really well example. Sometimes they'll add a bunch of diversity, and then they make the story suck balls. And it's like, maybe put some more effort into the story being good, and then add diversity. You know? I think like Fallout is a great example of that doing it like the right way. The story is really good. It's not lazy. It doesn't feel like they're just adding a bunch of identity, like people with identities just to carry the story. But instead, it's like, oh, we made a really good story, and then we added people of different, like, you know, whatever races and this and that and the other thing. But it works really well. That's a good example, I suppose.
Mainstream media in recent years.
Sure.
Just so I understand what the dynamic is there.
Did you play Final Fantasy 16?
I did not.
Of course not.
Oh my god. So they had a character in Final Fantasy 16. His name is.
I mean, like every Final Fantasy character has always been very. What the fuck? Has always been very feminine. And I think that's so that even women would want to play the character because they can identify with them. Like if you look at Cloud, I mean, it's a very feminine man. Realistically, let's be real here, okay, dude? It's fucking femboy.
Dion, and he was like the prince of an area. He was like the person who could like channel Bahamut, right? And he was gay, and it was part of the story. And they actually blocked sale for that game in some places in the Middle East because Square Enix didn't want to censor the game for that reason. And I respected them a lot for that.
But that was
okay.
Wait, they refused to block the game? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah. Square Enix did not do that.
And that was a good representation of like gay. Or trans,
yeah, I think so. I really do.
Okay.
I think that whenever you create a character, that the character's personality, sometimes it feels like when characters are added into stories.
Oh, you want to know what a great representation of gay people is? What is it called? Boondock Saints with Willem Dafoe's character.
Actually, if they have like an LGBT like lean to them, they can be turned into being like a one-dimensional, like I guess identification of that person. And it's like they make like an overt effort to talk about that and discuss it. And I feel like in a lot of times it can come off as patronizing or talking down to the audience.
Okay.
It feels very inauthentic to me.
Okay, so yeah. there are instances where there's like gay representation, trans representation that's like ham-fisted and just simply added on as not a necessary vehicle for narrative development, but instead simply for identity points, right?
Sure.
To do diversity. Okay, so not to get too lost in the sauce, we can get back to this part of the conversation in a second. But my point was that like that level of LGBTQ representation, it's for diversity, it's for marketing purposes. Usually, it's just like sometimes it can be shitty narrative devices, but ultimately it doesn't really matter. But a lot of people still get mad at it, right? A lot of people in the Western world still get mad at it.
Okay.
And for me, in particular, there is a hierarchy of needs for and that all human beings respond to, all human beings exist under.
Is this like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or is this like something else?
Maslow's hierarchy of needs is appropriate, but like there's a higher standard because the Maslow's hierarchy of needs usually.
I'm a little lost of what the point. Like, what point are we getting to? I think it sounds like what we're going to get to. it sounds like there's no need to start with the whole video game conversation. It sounds like what we're going to get to is like what I was talking about is like abundance. You know, when you have to worry about your house and home first, it makes it difficult for you to care about LGBTQ people. That's perfectly fine and reasonable. Absolutely, sure. Thank you for the $5 from Taco Boy. To me, true pandering is when character is bland and boring, brings nothing to the story. Anything else just for brownie points. Yeah, that's fair. I agree with that. Yeah, sure.
Is under the confines of like at least a developed country, where a developed country that is not constantly being bombarded or victims of like colonial occupation. My point is that Palestinians are not inherently anti-gay or anti-trans or anything like that. There are gay Palestinians. There are
yeah, I would say that they're no more inherently anti-gay or trans than anybody else in the entire world. Like I think that yeah, I mean, generally speaking, we're all people. I think we're all generally the same. It's more of a culture thing.
trans Palestinians, both living in Gaza, in historic Palestine, and also certainly outside of Gaza.
Well, I mean, it was also historically, you know, Israel too. But
the problem is, the problem is there is no time or space or opportunity for them to engage in queer liberation, let alone, you know, advocate for more representation in their artworks, for example, when they're too busy being bombed and destroyed and killed and ethnically displaced for 76 years under an apartheid regime that is a settler colonial occupation.
Okay, real quick. You don't think that I support Israel, do you?
I don't, but
I do.
I think that, no, I don't think you support Israel, but I think you saying that.
I mean, the unfortunate reality is that like Israel was created when I believe both the UN, Britain had control over the area. This was when borders weren't as well defined. And they wanted a place to be able to be Jewish because they, you know, were just 10 million of them were just genocided, you know, during World War II. And so they were given land that was like incontestable at the time. The UN had control over. They got that land and they established. And multiple countries have attacked them for the past, you know, several decades without any help, and they still defended themselves. And they were allied with Russia at one point. And now they're allied with America, and now we're trying to preserve their ability to exist. I don't think everything is perfect, but I believe that they have the right to exist. And this is what I'm talking about. When Hasan says stuff like this, he is effectively communicating that Israel doesn't have the right to exist. And if you think that, that's fine. But like, I just find that particularly problematic. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that Jews should be able to have their own place, you know, especially since it's not only for Jewish people. Like 20% of the population is Palestinian. They vote, they take part in elections, they take part in office. Is there inequality? Probably. But they're able to vote and take part in elections. It's not like it's completely restricted from Palestinians. Palestinians have citizenship in Israel. So it's not like this horrible terror state where you can't do anything or exist. So,
like Palestinians are immoral or evil or have an evil, antiquated culture or are barbaric is not only ahistorical. What's up?
I do think that.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think you're wrong.
I don't know, man. Like, how can you be in support of a culture that tells people that they can't be who they want to be? Like, I mean,
that's a fair question.
Really, I mean, if I was advocating for what the laws were there, I would get banned for hate speech. How's that acceptable?
Yeah, I think you are misunderstanding what their culture is, what the Palestinian culture is, and you're also not setting the standard under the material conditions in which they.
He's not misrepresenting the culture. You really can't have it both ways. You can't have it. He's misrepresenting the culture, but then also you're not taking into consideration material conditions, because the material conditions argument is a good argument, but like their culture there is not great. And again, argue not because of anything inherent to them, but because of the lack of material conditions. Thank you for the $2 from Mike Danielson. How is the friction burn down? It's 2 and 5, brother. Thank you.
Exist.
I don't think that you can do.
Who got banned for hate speech? Did Asmongold get banned for hate speech? Well, I mean, that's what happens, bro.
So there are a number of other countries.
For example.
Okay, let me go after this.
Okay, you go ahead. But I will give you more historically appropriate points in a second.
So basically, the reason why I don't like what they do is because it's based off of a religious theocracy. And so you can look at other religious theocracies in other countries that aren't being bombed, and the one commonality that they have is that they all suppress people's identity and they express their freedom of expression.
True. I mean, this is true.
And I think that any culture and any type of government that is derivative of a religion is fundamentally inferior. I think this is true with any book. It's
all right. I mean, that's fair.
True with Judaism. It's true with Christianity. It's true with Islam.
I think that, I mean, I agree with this, generally speaking, but like, why not make that an explicit point in the beginning when you went on this anti-Palestinian rant? And I feel like this is like, why not express this? You're a content creator. You know how narratives can get out of control. So it's like, it almost feels intentional.
It's true with Hinduism. I think it's true with anything. And I find it to be very problematic that we're using these books.
His side account? What is that? Like, what account was that? Was that like his YouTube? What was it?
Books as a guideline for like how to make laws when these books actively encourage killing people for different types of identities. And obviously, like, I understand that there's like a huge spectrum of people that are part of any culture. There's people that are way more progressive, people that are way less progressive. But what I see is that I see countries that have laws that haven't been bombed, right? You look at like Saudi Arabia, like Dubai. A lot of these other countries still have the same types of expressions or same type of restrictions on the expression for LGBT. And I find that,
I mean, that's fair, even if they have a little bit more abundance. Yeah.
to be problematic and inferior. And I think that you could I want to make sure that this is very clear because, like, I don't want you to think that this is something that's like oh, the brown people over there are wrong. I would say the exact same thing for us, you know, like the church, you know, like Christianity. Like, if you look at,
Based Asmongold take here. Got to give him credit, man. Got to give him credit, especially since it might piss off some of his audience. So, you know what? I guess I was wrong about some things about Asmongold.
for example, like Salem witch trials. It's disgusting. It's horrible. So all I'm saying is that I think that there is a standard that's being applied, and I don't really understand how that's defensible at all. I don't like, and that's what doesn't make sense to me. Is
It's
that
not.
like, okay, well, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
But here's the problem.
Okay.
It's not defensible, but I think most people, including like the
Yeah.
gay Palestinians or queer Palestinians or queer Lebanese people,
Sure,
understand that there is no room for advocating for civil liberties in your own domestic policies when you are escaping bombing
So,
campaigns.
I see your point.
So
but do you
this
see
is
my
the
point
reason.
that-
This is the reason why so many of these countries,
Mhm.
whether it be Iran, whether
Yeah.
it be Afghanistan, whether it be Egypt, or many of these places that were far more liberal from Western standards, from the Western understanding of like social liberalism, multiple decades ago, before Western intervention, are no longer as socially liberal as they once were. Because
talking about like the 1917 Iran thing, basically.
not 1917, but yes,
Or it's
circa
1979,
1950s.
excuse me. Yes, sorry.
And when you look at the history of these countries, and not to say that like I don't personally think that Saudi Arabia deserves to be annihilated for having a religious theocracy. I don't personally think Israel deserves to be annihilated for operating within like liberal confines, but still maintaining a religious theocracy that is baked into now their constitution.
Do you
Israel,
think that I support that?
no, I don't think you support that either. But, oh, wait, well, in terms of the Palestinians, I think the quote was that inferior cultures deserve to be wiped out.
Oh, I don't know about that. I
I don't know if he said that exactly, but that seemed to be the general sense. So, like, I mean, that's to me, that's not an uncharitable framing of what Hasan was saying. I mean, excuse me, of what Asmongold was saying. So, yeah.
I feel like anytime that you're killing people based off of anything like that, I don't think that Israel or America or anybody has the right to come in and tell Palestine how to live and for them like what they're supposed to do, right? I'm not trying to tell them what to do, but if you want me to accept their culture as being equivalent to ours, I won't do that.
Okay.
And I do think that it's worse.
Okay, but culture, you understand that culture changes throughout time, and it is
Sure, and right now it's not good, right? I think it's okay. I think it's okay. We can acknowledge that.
directly a consequence of like how people or what people are experiencing in the United States
I
of
think that
America.
we're evidence of that. We're evidence of that because like we're
Yes.
much farther along.
So,
Yeah, I
so
think a
do
lot
you
of
think?
places
Do you think like I don't think you would agree that bombing places makes them more tolerant to?
Absolutely not.
Okay, and I don't think that
Absolutely
you.
not.
I don't think that you think that
But like Asmongold, yeah, I kind of like Asmongold. He's not too bad. He's growing on me a little bit.
like nuking
Maybe we'll become friends one day, and I can help him clean his room.
America, for example, circa 2013 when gay marriage was.
We're not going to bomb the gay into them. I understand that.
Okay.
You're totally right.
Yeah, no, I think that the general perspective, and again, Asmongold, expressed this in a very disrespectful way, which is the problem. But the general sentiment for me is like it's hard to feel empathy for a group of people who do not feel empathy for me or could never feel empathy for me when their laws are just like fundamentally, regressive, and again, like antithetical. And like my own family going there would mean like my family, like my wife would be treated worse than any of my gay family. You know what I mean? I have an issue with that. It's hard to feel a particular amount of empathy for like religious we'll say like explicit religious culture. I think that's a better way to say it,
Okay. So
Yeah.
in terms of some of your statements,
Yeah, inferior culture I think is bad to say. It just sounds like a dog whistle to say that like Muslim people are bad. I think that's the problem.
like not only I think you're
Because there's Muslim Americans that are perfectly fine. Like westernized anything is solid. That's my opinion.
wrong on the history of queer culture in Arab countries, in Muslim nations in general. I'll give you one example. The Ottoman Empire actually decriminalized homosexuality in the Tanzimat era. I think it was like 18th century. And before then, it was not even like a problem. It was never an issue.
Yeah, and then like I'm pretty sure people like Romans used to fuck each other in the ass too. But you know, we're talking about the general culture. So
Far before Western nations ever actually, decriminalized or made it legal to be gay. And this is oftentimes a not really mentioned aspect of.
Well, I mean, that's cool, but I don't see the necessary relevancy to the conversation that, like, you know, I think Ottoman Empire, my understanding, Middle Eastern Empire, right? I don't see the necessarily see the relevancy of that in today's world, especially since, like, I don't know that there's really any Muslim culture that unfortunately has any real, like, generally looks down on LGBTQ people. So
Of the Muslim world or Muslim culture or the Arab history or the region's history at all. Most people don't know this, and it's like genuinely shocking to them.
I cannot feel bad empathy for Gaza because not many affected are so young. Yeah, I get that. I understand that. That makes perfect sense. It's also unfortunate that like a lot of these young people are used in the military. I mean, especially, you know, it's pretty unfortunate.
You might maybe even be shocked to find out that the Ottoman Empire, where Palestine was seen as a safe haven for Jews as they were escaping the Spanish Inquisition, for example, and many other pogroms that Jewish people experienced in, especially in Western and Eastern Europe. The Ottoman Empire in the MENA region, all the way that spans to Morocco, was seen as a safe haven and safe harbor for Jews, where they were allowed to coexist in far better conditions under Islamic rule, technically.
Well, yeah. I mean, I imagine there was better conditions versus, you know, versus what was the competition there? Nazi Germany.
I was far more tolerant.
I would go even farther.
I don't think that it is quite as simple as Jews were treated as equals in those areas, just to be clear.
Than you are. I think that back then it wasn't just the fact that they were accepting
No, they're not using babies in their military, but they're using a lot of young people, like a lot of teenagers.
of gay. I think that they were way more scientifically oriented. They were way more focused on learning and mathematics. I think that's evidently true. I don't think anybody would say the Ottoman Empire was shitty or anything like that. I think they were very progressive for their time. It's not even a question.
So
I totally agree with you.
But things have changed in the region since then.
They sure have.
So what do you think is the difference there? Like, what do you think has happened in the hundreds of years that have gone by, or especially in the last 100 years? Why?
Well, it's going to be like some form of like colonialism or colonization or like America impact or Western impact on those areas. Yeah, probably. Sure.
Why has the attitude overall in terms of governance changed so dynamically and so dramatically?
I think that obviously Western impact is going to be like an example, you know, in our fight for resources. But I would also say that, like, who are we really fighting for resources? I mean, my understanding is that Hamas is backed by indirectly by Iran, who's backed by Russia. And I don't think it's as simple to say like, well, Western people going there and looking for resources is exactly like what's causing this problem. I mean, the competition force is Russia of us, and Russia could implement the exact same things. They are a superpower, right? I think that part of it is that culture raining down as well. I mean, we are fighting basically proxy wars through everything. Like our Israel-Palestine conflict really is like Russia is involved, like through funding terrorist organizations, through Iran, through into Hamas. So that's my understanding. I don't think it's as simple as like us trying to get resources, and that's a factor for sure, is causing the problem. I think that like the backing of some of these other places like Russia is also a problem. Like Russia does not have freedom for gay people or women, or they have the same fundamental flaws there as well.
I think there's probably a bunch of different reasons for it, right? I mean, it's not like one reason, but I don't think that are we trying to imply that it's like American imperialism and interventionism that's caused this to happen? Is that kind of like where you're going with
No,
this?
I am saying that. America not only directly armed and radicalized fundamentalists in the region, including but not limited to Afghanistan, for example, with the Mujahideen, because they were seen as like a fighting force.
Is Russia considered a Western nation? Interesting. No, Russia's not usually considered a Western country. The West is generally defined as Europe and countries held by Europeans. I don't think that's true. But I understand what you're saying.
Could use against the communist-adjacent Afghan government or the USSR inevitably when the USSR did invade. But also beyond that, the most nationalistic or the most militant fundamentalists were perceived in Iran, for example, as the true liberators that were not willing to fight against the Western-backed Shah regime, the Western-backed monarchy in Iran. So that's the reason why a lot of people...
Wasn't the Shah regime trying to push for more progressive ideologies, though? I was like just looking at that on the side. What, isn't that what he was referring to before?
Whether they agreed with it or not, ultimately on the social front doesn't really matter. They were like, these guys are going to protect us. These guys are actually...
I mean, it's unfortunate because like when we pull out of Afghanistan, all of a sudden women were not allowed to go to university anymore. So again, I don't know that the implication that directly that every time Western intervention exists, it's bad or causing all these problems. I think that's a little reductionist, you know. And I would say that I'm probably just as educated on this as Hasan, because he's not. No, I'm just fucking around, you know.
Fighting back against this.
Maybe I want to see what Destiny has to say about this conversation. Maybe that would be better. I know people will cry about that, but I don't think that that's an unreasonable thing. I think he's generally decently level-headed. I don't know.
This ruthless rule of the Shah that was, you know, falsely torturing people on a regular basis.
Okay, so
that's usually
if your
how
argument is that, well, how do you reconcile that with the fact that there are other countries like Saudi Arabia, for example, that don't have that history but still have the same laws?
Oh, that's a great example. Saudi Arabia is allowed to exist like that because they have a valuable resource that they are gladly and willingly coordinating with the Western powers on, in terms of OPEC plus.
So you're telling us that they have abundance, but they're still living with that culture. So like how does why? Okay, so this is one of the problems I have with this. So I'm going to take Hasan at his word. He's saying that Saudi Arabia also has very restrictive rights, and they're allowed to do that. The West lets them do that because they have resources that they share. And so the implication is that, well, it's the West's fault to some extent. But my thing is if they have the abundance, I don't think the West is saying, hey, we're only going to trade with you if you hate women. So why don't they change? What's the excuse to them not making those reasonable changes? I don't understand. And now if you're saying the West lets them live like that, what you're implying is that the West should not let them live like that. And now you're saying that they should have a Western impact on the culture. The argument just seems kind of all over the place here.
So did Iran, but Iranian oil was refined by British Petroleum. Mossadegh at the time was a social democrat, very progressive for the time as well, wanted to nationalize their own extraction industries. And this was seen as a massive slight and it caused massive harm to the profit margins of British Petroleum, and the American intelligence and Western intelligence cooperated to overthrow Mossadegh very openly and very clearly. They implemented the Shah regime. He was brutal. He was a brutal autocrat. He was a monarch. People hated him. And at the end of the day, it was the Islamic Revolution and the fundamentalist forces that were the most successful in terms of fighting back against the Shah. That's the reason why they overtook the country and have been dominating the nation ever since. There are plenty of gay and trans people. By the way, Iran is actually weirdly very pro-trans, but I'm sure that you probably didn't know that. They're very homophobic, but they are very pro-trans. A lot of cultures are actually very pro-trans.
I struggle to believe that Iran is pro-trans, but also homophobic. I don't even think that they're. I don't even know. I don't know.
Way more than the United States of America.
I don't think I could take that on it. I don't think I could take that at face value.
America, maybe to a fault at times, like Iran, when they do forcible gender.
I mean, you look at like Native American culture. I think it's extremely popular. Norse culture. I mean, you could say the same thing about Loki, right? It's like the idea of being trans is like super old, like Shiva, right? Another good example. So I think that's true.
There's a concept of third gender in India, Pakistan, and many other places as well. So but that's besides the point. So what I'm trying to say is, we cannot exist outside of the material condition that we are subjected to. If you are living under a ruthless, corrupt autocratic rule, and there's a group of people that say, I'm going to fight back against this ruthless autocratic rule that is like Western power back.
Yeah, I can acknowledge that they grew up in like an oppressive area, while also like having less empathy for them because they hate gay and trans people. Like I feel the same way about American conservatives that like will vote Trump. A lot of times they're extraordinarily uneducated and unintelligent. And I feel bad. They grew up in those conditions. I still criticize them, and I feel like, and I know they're stupid. Like I don't mean to be rude, you know what I mean? But people who think Trump is good, not even vote Trump, let's say Trump is good. Those people are obviously very stupid. They grew up without education. They're dumb people. But I still criticize them. Like I don't know what to tell you. It's not like I have this. It's as if I'm not gonna. I can't completely dismiss people's bad decisions or choices or perspectives or cultures or anything just because of material conditions. Like at a certain point we have to realize like, yeah, the material conditions have an impact, a pretty tremendous one, but they still feel the way that they feel, and that is what it is. Like I can only operate based off that. I can't infantilize every single person that I see because they grew up in an area that didn't have access to particular resources.
Then people will be on board with that. They're gonna be like, oh, this is great. I love this revolution. I'm on board.
Okay, so I can go even farther than that. I totally understand why groups like ISIS happen. Like, if you look at people from ISIS, these are people that are like 20 years old. They've lived their entire life being occupied.
In school suspension, dude? Who likes that?
By a foreign power.
Okay,
I think that we're
there's a difference between ISIS and Iran,
Sure.
though. Like, I hope you understand that, right? And just like there's a difference between ISIS and Hamas and all these other like other.
I'm just giving
other...
you an example. I'm giving you an example of like, so I think extremist groups are created. So you got a lot of heat. You got a lot of hate. One of your most popular, biggest hits was that America deserved 9/11. Remember that?
Yes.
Bad day. Bad day. But what you meant to say is that American interventionism inadvertently caused this to happen.
No,
Am I
directly,
right?
not even inadvertently. It's a concept that historians call blowback.
Right. So just to be clear, this actually is a good example because Hasan said something intentionally provocative for attention, removed of nuance for that attention, and then I got tremendous blowback and then tried to restate what he actually meant, which is what Asmongold is doing right now, just to be clear.
I totally agree with you about that. I completely agree with you. I think that you're right. I defended that.
Yeah.
So my perspective is that I don't think that we can blame, like, I don't see the logic that all of these other countries that are like, you know, from the West, right, that are like much more progressive are somehow intervening and making this, like, these other countries in the Middle East hate gay people and like want to kill gay people. And I don't see how, like,
wait, you don't agree with that? You're saying?
No, I don't. I don't really see how they're congruent.
So
I don't. Like,
why
no,
do you
I
think
don't.
that? So why do you think that historically they didn't hate gay people, but now they do? Like, don't you?
I'm not sure.
You
I don't think it's fair to say historically they didn't hate gay people because the Ottoman Empire might have been a little bit more progressive. That's okay. I don't think it's that simple, but okay. I don't think the Ottoman Empire was the entirety of the entire Middle East there. That pretending otherwise is fucking insane.
recognize that like culture changes. You said that you
I don't I'm not on this narrative where it's like, no, it used to be actually perfect before the white people came by. No, that's not. It's incorrect. Absolutely not. There's no way. A period where the Ottoman Empire might have been, if I take Hasan's word for it, a little more progressive doesn't mean that everything was perfect and fucking la-di-da.
you understand that like the Ottoman Empire was more progressive in comparison to its European counterparts in terms of like the way that they view gay people.
Being more progressive than its European counterparts at that time is not the same thing as being accepting of gay people. They are not more progressive anymore. Sorry, I don't know what to tell you. You're really trying hard here.
People even in homosexuality in general.
I think that we can come to the agreement, and like we can talk about historically all you want, right? I think that in some cases, like that's true. In a lot of cases, like the way that this is perceived around the world, like
I think that is probably a much more complex topic that we'd have to like talk to legitimate, like educated historians on, and not take Hasan's word for it because he wants to just say America bad, and that's one of the problems is you really can't listen to Hasan when it comes to anything about the West because he hates the West just for its the virtue of its existence. And it's one of the problems. Like you can't really take. He's not an impartial individual that's trying to have a nuanced, intelligent conversation. So
Romans looked at it differently. Greeks looked at it differently. Everybody's looked at it differently. But I'm talking about what's happening today. And if I'm looking at those cultures today, those are cultures that are oppressing people based off of their identity. And at a certain point,
right now, the Palestinians don't have any structural governance to be able to do that regardless. So there is no.
Well, what? Yes, they don't like gay people over there, and they do have laws. Just so
there is no like gay oppression happening in Gaza because the only oppression that's happening in Gaza is that Israel's lighting them on fire with.
Okay, they say do hate gay people. Just to be clear, they don't like gay people. It's you can't be gay in Palestine. But okay,
regular frequency.
I understand the idea of focusing on the bigger issue at the time. I do understand that, but it's not like it's magically that they like love gay people and they're accepting over there.
And we're paying for it.
Yes. So
it's turned into a crystal.
In terms of like
cool.
Islamist fundamentalism, right?
Yeah.
In terms of Islamist fundamentalism or the way that like you perceive Palestinians as viewing gay people.
Yeah.
There has never been an opportunity for Palestinian people to engage in queer liberation because in the hierarchy of needs, the number one need for them is...
Well, I mean, if you're telling us that they're like Saudi Arabia has that financial abundance and the ability to advocate for that and they won't, then to me, like, yeah, there might be an impact of surrounding countries not wanting things to change in general. And maybe that's a problem as well. I mean...
is to stop...
It doesn't seem as simple as America bad here.
Israel from killing them. Is to stop Israel from dominating them since 1948. And even before then as well, but... After Israel was formed in 1948, that has been the game for the most part. They have never had an opportunity to even think about queer liberation. If your house is on fire, you're not going to be spending a whole lot of time thinking about the color of your curtains, right? And that's what this is. There's a much larger problem at hand. And this is precisely the reason why a lot of people actually, never fully comprehend this, but a lot of leftists in the Western world do understand that intersectionality. And regardless of like the perceived queer phobia from Palestinians and Palestinian governance, they still, of course, offer solidarity. I said this earlier, and I think it's a take bear repeating. I'm in favor of Medicare for all and universal social safety nets in the United States of America unconditionally. I do not believe in refusing to offer, for example, any sort of healthcare to a person because they're a Nazi, even, right? That's an extreme case. I think that they deserve healthcare.
I agree with you, and I would even go farther than that. I think that if somebody's an illegal immigrant, I don't think that we should ever tell. I think it's
okay. I almost feel like we're overcorrecting here, Asmongold. Almost feels like Asmongold is so scared that he's overcorrecting. I mean, I guess sure. Probably do need illegal immigrant. I mean, I don't know. I understand the argument for like why an illegal immigrant would need healthcare, because a lot of times they're supporting our financial infrastructure. Like, we can't just oust every illegal immigrant that's in the United States, whether we want to or not, because our economy is dependent on them in some capacity. Whether it's people working a wage in like a small business or even a big business that's intentionally hiring illegal immigrants so that they can save money, or if there are people that are on some kind of welfare system or program, that money is taken and it's redistributed into the economy in a different way, right? And that's the whole concept of like glass floors and whatnot. You know, that's why when welfare was first created in like the 1940s or whatever, it had such a positive impact, because like people were still able to buy food, and they were able to basically support you know, food selling industries, truck driving, and wherever you bought it from, etc., etc. But you know, on the other hand, incentivizing giving healthcare to illegal immigrants is going to incentivize them to come here further. But you could always, yeah. Anyway, it feels like an overcorrection in what he's saying, but maybe it's not. Maybe I just don't know who Asmongold is.
Disgusting to tell a doctor or tell a healthcare provider to let somebody die or to let them bleed out or something like that, just because of that.
Well, that's a little different than giving them access to healthcare. Telling them that they have to treat anybody in an emergency scenario at the hospital is different from providing free like healthcare to them generally.
Completely agree with you. I had to pay my taxes recently. I'm sure you're probably about in the same place. It was 7 figures. And so I have no problem with that.
I live in California. It's pretty significant.
You got a bet. Yeah. It's
but I don't care.
Good.
I don't mind that.
I don't either. I
wouldn't mind it either, dude, if I had that much money.
To be paying for people used to pay for my food stamps. Now I'm paying for somebody else's. And if they raise my taxes to pay for Medicare for all, I would be happy and I would vote for that.
So if you understand that, right?
That.
So you recognize that. Would you say that like a religious enclave in Alabama, for example, deserves to be wiped out for their understanding of like gay people, like a white religious enclave?
Oh. No, but I mean, that sounds like what Asmongold was communicating. I wouldn't say that they deserve to be wiped out. I would just have less caring for them, like as people. I just care less. Like if it's an area that just like, yeah, they don't like gay and trans people and they're like suffering from something, I would just be like, oh, it sucks for you. I don't really care though. You're a piece of shit. I would struggle with empathy for those groups of people. Like, yeah, I would. But again, Asmongold, what he's saying does come off as like, oh, they deserve to be killed
in Alabama
for their culture, which I don't think is true. I just have less empathy for cultures that I find to be less accepting, right?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I don't think that they deserve to be wiped out, but I would not advocate for them. I would not look at that group and say, this is a group of people that I support.
So you can understand where the confusion comes from when you
and I can see that. That's why I wanted to. Yeah, sure, right, sure, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about it, right? Because I think that you and we had a conversation about this before, and I can very much easily empathize with Palestinians. Of course I can, but I don't think that it's entirely true that
I want to make a joke, but I'd get banned for it.
Palestine, like, I mean, didn't
it would be too bad, the joke I want to say.
Palestine support Hitler?
No,
sure they did.
No. What you're talking about is the British colonial British colonial occupation put forward a leader. Oftentimes in colonies, when you engage in like colonial actions, like and British Mandate Palestine was obviously a colony of the English, they will appoint a person into a position of power that is more acceptable to British needs and desires in the region to dominate the people. This is, I mean, history is riddled with examples such as this one. The Palestinian Grand Mufti was a singular person who went and linked up with Adolf Hitler.
Who's that person? I'm wondering.
And you know, thought that he could coordinate with Adolf Hitler in terms of like ridding Palestine of the Jews. Having said that, however, 11,000
and that sounds pretty bad.
It does. But when you realize that one, there were also Jewish militias, early Zionist militias that also sought out Adolf Hitler's help and tried to coordinate with Adolf Hitler. You understand that this.
Okay, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. I'm just looking into this. Is apparently somebody who aligned himself with Hitler. Oh yeah, I mean he was implanted by the British government, so that is something to keep in mind. I mean that certainly does not look good for Britain. That's certainly fair. That's certainly fair. Interesting. Very interesting.
has no bearing on an entire people and what their actual attitudes were. Not only that, but also 11,000 Palestinians actually fought alongside the Allied forces against Adolf Hitler. So Palestinians, by far greater numbers, actually fought against Adolf Hitler than the one British occupation guy that actually linked up with Adolf Hitler. It's actually a common historic Holocaust revision.
Like they had sex?
Talking point that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu once famously utilized as well, where he falsely claimed that Adolf Hitler did not want to kill the Jews until he talked to the Palestinian Grand Mufti, who gave him the idea of killing the Jews and doing the final solution. This was such a gross historical revisionist talking point that obviously the entirety of Israeli society actually criticized Benjamin Netanyahu for saying such
but
a
he did want to get rid of the Jews, though, right?
Yeah, but it's a singular person that has no bearing on real Palestinian existence, especially when much larger numbers of Palestinians fought along.
Well, I imagine that there was still not exactly the greatest sentiment. Sorry, I was distracted. I'm sure that there were Palestinian people who hated Jewish people, and they probably fell for the propaganda, like the German propaganda. But okay,
alongside the Allied forces, right?
I think that it.
But it sounds like a kind of a moot talking point. I don't even know why we brought it up in the fall. Because Asmongold's like searching for reasons to justify his dehumanization of Palestinian people in such an aggressive way.
Definitely does matter if a figurehead of a country is supporting Hitler.
I think it's not a figurehead of a country, though. It's the figurehead. It's an appointed person
and
that has no bearing.
And
for example,
don't you feel like it's a bit unfair for you to attribute every instance of bigotry and bad behavior to being the West's fault?
Yeah, it is inappropriate, but this time he does seem to be right about this. So it's kind of something to keep in mind there.
No, I think I have a very realistic and materialist analysis of these sorts of things.
I don't think that that's true. I think that this is one of the instances where he happens to be right.
Things where I think that people don't have time to fight for gay liberation when, like I said, they're too busy trying to literally rebuild their homes after it's bombed, especially by a force that, you know, doesn't have like automatic heat-seeking missiles that avoid gay people. You know what I mean? They're killing gay people and trans people in Gaza every fucking day.
Yeah, again, it's something to keep in mind that unfortunately Hamas is hiding within civilian infrastructure. So. Oh, that's not good.
Like there is no, like gay liberation is not a real conversation here. It's just a mere talking point that a lot of people who defend Israel, not saying you do, but a lot of people who defend Israel try to repackage Israel's violence and contextualize it and make it seem more appropriate to an American audience that is sometimes pro-gay and pro-queer. It rarely ever works. A lot of queer people still don't give a shit. They're like, I don't care. Just stop killing these people is their attitude. So that's it. That's the reality of the matter is that once Palestine is liberated, then they can have this conversation internally. But right now, Western forces are allowing the death and destruction of this people to continue.
What do you think the odds are that after this stops happening, that the Palestinians are going to get together and say that it's okay to be gay?
I don't know, because I can't even imagine a world where this death and destruction isn't constant. But I would say that just like in the United States of America, you know, people inevitably evolved, inevitably fought back, and
what do you think?
Created an environment for queer liberation. Even
that's a really good question, Asmongold.
Though to this day, there are still a shit ton of problems that especially trans people experience on a regular basis.
Oh, I mean, it to me, I'm sure you're on Twitter probably more than I am.
I'm not.
And so, really?
Yeah, I deleted it off my phone. I rarely go on it unless I'm live.
Nick did the same.
That's probably smart because it's a fucking brain rot. I've been like legitimately considering posting clips on there. But my wife's like, you really shouldn't. It's not a good place to go. And then every time I look up the app, it's just constant berating and barrage of either brain rot, drama, racism, sexism. It's actually fucking psychotic. And I don't know if I want to. And part of me is like, you know, maybe it wouldn't be so bad because, you know, they're trying to expand their monetization scheme. And so if they expand their monetization scheme, maybe that'll shift the platform because more normal content creators like myself would be like, oh, like what if we, you know, went into here in some capacity. But yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know if it's worth it. It just seems like a fucking brain rot central, man. It seems fucking psychotic. Thank you for the 15-month small gut from Hub Servat. Papa, would you goon to Hasan's Hamas glaze? No, obviously not.
Same thing. That's crazy. Wow. Okay. Well, okay. I'm on Twitter a lot. How much more racist do you think that it's gotten and like homophobic do you think it's gotten in the last like 2 years?
Much more. Extraordinarily more racist and homophobic. Like insanely more. Like unreasonably more racist and homophobic. Like shockingly, I would imagine. It's like a fucking it's literally it's psychotic.
I think it's like 500x, right?
Yes.
Like it's insane. It's crazy, and I think that it's just it just keeps getting worse too. And I'm curious. Like,
yeah, because Elon Musk is not doing anything to stop it under free speech, but he's obviously not going to prioritize the free speech of the company trying to make money.
Kind of what your viewpoint is, because we're talking about like kind of how like these different cultures are accepting people, and like now, what do you think about like Saudi Arabia and like the way that they're like, I guess effectively sports washing things? I think that's the term that's being used a lot, right, with like esports, etc. Like, what's your take on that?
What?
I think that Saudi Arabia is also a religious theocracy that is simply trying to moderate their viewpoint in an effort to become more accepted by Western culture, and
hey, then I guess it's working. That's a good thing.
And bring in Western capital into the country.
Sure.
Ultimately, if they did become a queer safe haven, for example, overnight, there's still plenty of issues in Saudi society in terms of utilizing slave labor, in terms of death and destruction.
For sure, but it does sound like they're going in the right path. So are we saying that video games are making Saudi Arabia, it's making them slightly less hateful to gays and trans people and women? That's fucking based, dude. Video games are based.
Falls like indigenous populations in areas where they want to do building projects. And beyond that, there is the whole genocide in Yemen. A lot of these things can be solved inevitably. And there were some initiative from China that brought Iran and Saudi Arabia to the table to stop the destruction of Yemen, for example. That was relatively successful pre-October 7. But like, there are a shit ton of problems in Saudi Arabia still. Having said that,
recently they just let women drive.
Yes,
very recently. Yeah,
yes,
no,
a lot of the things that people who use
mistake, am I right? I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
This kind of sentiment against
it doesn't really matter because women don't like driving anyway. Actually, my wife likes to drive. I just can't let her drive because I'll get car sick. I can't be in the passenger seat. You know what I mean, dude?
Palestinians oftentimes will overlook Saudi Arabia or other Gulf states that have the exact same rules and restrictions. But once again, this is more so about allowing right-wing sentiment to fester and dominate a society. There are plenty of members in the Israeli Knesset, for example, that also don't want women to learn how to fucking read and write.
Sure, but Israel is objectively more free to women, children, gay people, and trans people. So it's like, okay, there are people in every society that are more progressive and more conservative. But what's the dominating narrative in some of these areas is the real question.
It's so bad. Like, absolutely, you're completely right.
And there are plenty of people in America who feel similar ways as well.
I've been hearing a lot of bad things about women being able to vote.
Yes, some of those people gain more prominence in society as society becomes.
Thank you for the $1 from Tyler Rory. Am I saying that right? Rory? Incredible stuff.
Some of these people end up gaining more prominence in society, and slowly but surely they try to reorient society to their own desires. That's the reason why a lot of people fight back against this sort of thing. Okay? That's the reason why a lot of people fight back. Gay people, queer people, people who are aligned with them fight back against this sort of sentiment in an effort to make sure that it never turns into a society that does this kind of thing to gay people, queer people in general. So
does it again? Well, we used to do it for a long time. I mean, gay marriage being legal is very, very recent.
Yes.
I can't imagine how much more substance there is to this conversation to be 3 hours long. I'm going to give it another 20 minutes, though.
And it's already...
I totally support that.
Yeah.
I think that we got the gist of it so far, though. And what the gist of this conversation is, Asmongold said something that's not super bland in the hottest way ever. If he had just said, like, hey, guys, listen, I struggle to feel empathy for any group of people that doesn't have acceptance for gay people, trans people, and women, I don't think that's a particularly hot take. If he had said, like, it's hard for me as somebody that's in America to really care too much about stuff overseas, I don't think that's a particularly hot take. What Asmongold said, though, is that they have an inferior culture in Palestine, despite the fact that this guy used to use a rat as an alarm clock, wipe his tooth blood on the walls, would pull his teeth out with pliers, and ate, donuts with maggots on it. And he tries to call another culture inferior with the perceived undertone, especially from like a very racist audience. Not all of his audience, but like the dog whistle undertone being that like brown people don't deserve the right to exist. That's what I heard when I heard it. So really, this is just a reframing of like a much more normal perspective of like, hey, I struggle with empathy for these places. That's fine. But it really has become like, it's just insane. And that's pretty much what it is. It's effectively the same thing as Hasan saying that America deserved 9/11, when he could have said like, hey, some of our foreign policies have caused this, which is true. But he said it in an intentionally provocative way, though what Asmongold's saying, in my opinion, is much more dangerous. So that's pretty much where we're at, and now Asmongold's kind of trying to reframe the narrative. So
my point is, we've never given the opportunity to many of these countries in the MENA region to be able to have the freedom to continue.
Thank you for the $2 from Jay. Thank you, brother. And thank you for another $2 from Tyler Rory. Did you try to say something with the thing?
Continue developing and have their own have their own civil liberties and have their own fight for civil liberties. And we will never be able to see what it would look like if they were given the opportunity without our intervention. We can only look to the past where that intervention wasn't as severe and point to a time when they were
Yeah, America deserved Hasan. True.
relatively open-minded, especially in comparison to their European counterparts. But the way that we see what they do, okay, is never translated to the way that we operate here in the United States of America. I think that dynamic stems from dehumanization of Arab people in general that is unfortunately all too commonplace in Western media and in Western society.
I think it happens a lot. I mean, obviously, after 9/11, I mean, I've, have a number of Arab friends, and they've told me it was a very, very bad time. So I think that you're absolutely right about that. And it is
I don't know, man. I got off from school, so kind of based. I'm just kidding.
problematic. I don't really think that it's fair to.
Thank you for the 7-month medium gut from Tyler Jelly Welch. I like the way you phrase it better, saying that our culture is better because we value those things and not putting the other culture down. Yeah, I think that's a better way to frame it. Thank you for the medium gut from Funk Goes On. I appreciate that.
Say that, of course, all people that are Arabs, and also
yeah, I mean, that's what it was. Asmongold was farming for a viral based hot take. Let's not pretend that Asmongold is stupid. He's actually smarter than I think most people give him credit for. He's much more intelligent than I think that people will give him credit for. He's not stupid. And so he knew when the way that he was talking was extraordinarily dehumanizing of people. And I don't think it's unreasonable to say he was looking to farm a hot Twitter take, on the fucking psychopath space of Twitter. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that he was looking for that. I mean, he was gooning when he should have been munting. It really is what happened.
Really, it's not about being an Arab. It's about having a religious theocracy that enables you to dehumanize other people.
Yeah, Palestinians don't have a theocracy, by the way, just so you understand. They don't have anything. They don't have any sort of real valid form of governance at all. They have never been allowed to have a real valid form of governance or any sort of autonomy or any sort of sovereignty, at least, especially since 1948.
That's interesting because I've seen Hasan say that Palestinian support for Hamas is rather high. So I assumed that was their kind of form of governance. No, but okay, maybe I'm just misunderstanding what he was saying. Thank you for the small gut from Snobby Lion.
But in all the other places in the same area, pretty much all of them that are doing their own governance come to the same conclusion about gay people.
Yeah,
they pretty much they do.
So so this is really interesting that you're saying this because
not really. It makes sense. Yeah,
you recognize that a lot of those other Gulf states are in alignment with the United States of America and are allowed to operate in whichever ways they see fit, including but not limited to helping Israel. Right?
Okay, so this is the biggest problem. This is the biggest problem that I have with Hasan here. So when it comes to Palestine, Hasan is saying that Western-backed Israel is oppressing them to such an extent that they don't have the ability or energy or effort to shift their values to be more progressive of gay and trans people, which is a perfectly reasonable take. But then when it comes to surrounding areas that are financially abundant and are allies with Western society, he goes, well, see, those people are allowed to act like that because the West lets them. And it's okay, which take is it? Is it the take that we should have influence on other cultures or we shouldn't have influence on other cultures? Because now what it sounds like you're saying is that we should be trying to influence other cultures. We should be trying to influence these surrounding cultures to change their mind. And so it gets it's so interesting in that some instances it's America's fault for having too much influence, and then in other instances it's America's fault for not having enough influence. And this is why it's frustrating to listen to Hasan talk about these things, because it is always America bad is just the number one perspective and take in you instance.
They get F-16s and fleets of American planes, and they get security contracts for their consistent maintenance of American interests in the region.
Do you think I support that?
I don't. I'm not even saying if you support it or not. I'm simply stating that monopolizing an entire region of people and assuming that they all are operating on the same boundaries is incorrect. It would be akin to.
There's always going to be people that are like that, but I also think that they do the same thing to gay people. In the same way that you're looking at everybody, and they actually will do it. It doesn't matter whether a gay person is a good person or not. If they're gay in that culture, they can lose their life. They can go to jail. They'll have their life completely ruined.
Okay, you understand that there's a difference between a sovereign nation state that has been a monarchy that America has funded and allowed.
I would imagine that if if there are areas that are more powerful cultural posts, we'll say, in the Middle East, maintain the values and laws of treating women and gay people as less than, then that's going to echo across the entirety of the Middle East, and it's going to maintain that status quo. And by the way, I agree that I think that America should be harder on these other countries to make them more progressive. But like, you know, Hasan seems to think that it's bad when they have an impact, and so it's just like, Jesus Christ, like, there's never a consistent argument.
Allowed to foster whatever kind of autonomy, sometimes impunity, as a matter of fact, versus like the Palestinian population, though, right?
I think that definitely there's...
Hey, thank you for the $20 from LS1490. I don't understand lacking empathy for countries that oppress women and LGBTQ people when probably more than half their population are women and LGBTQ. Seems like an oppressed majority being sacrificed to war by a minority. I'm not understanding what you're not understanding. I lack empathy for countries that have regressive values. I also support Israel's right to exist, just to be absolutely clear. I don't support the indiscriminate killing, of course. But like, I'm going to side with the country that has the better general values, which is Israel. I don't think everything that they're doing is perfect. I would like to see a two-state solution. And I'd like to see like Western support of Palestine to give it more abundance. But like, at the end of the day, you know, it's hard to ignore the fact that, like, you know, Hamas is continuously attacking Israel, despite the fact that they are outnumbered and they're hiding inside of civilian infrastructure. It's just like a really fucked up scenario. I mean, it's just terrible. But I struggle to care that much, because they have an incredibly regressive, like, cultural value in the like Middle Eastern countries in general. You know, if my wife or my family couldn't be safe existing going somewhere, I don't really particularly care for that place in general, and I have like less empathy for that place. So
there's a big difference. But what I'm saying is that I don't think that difference has been manifested. Like, the difference is that when you have a culture that is derivative off of a religion that I think is oppressive, and it hasn't been modernized, you have people that are using it as a tool to oppress other people. I do genuinely think that cultures that are built off of religions like that are inferior. And I think that we've worked really hard to get away from that. And that work isn't done yet. I think it's still going on to this day. And it's disappointing for me because I've seen things go backwards a lot. I think in the last 2 years, they've gone backwards in a tremendous way. You see it on social media. I saw like there was some bullshit thing about how 21% of Gen Z think Hitler had some good ideas. That's very concerning for me. It's extremely concerning.
Yeah, I mean,
is it like a real thing?
It's a lack of education in America. It's really bad. But once again, like, what you're doing is something that I see a lot, which is a conflation of conservatism and reactionary ideals with members of an entire religion. So in the United States,
thank you for the medium gift from Crab Ray Gunner
of America, right?
Do they just kind of like fucking go back and forth and waffle around for the next 2 hours? There's no fucking way that there's anything of substance here.
You have really, really freakish religious guys, right? You have people who want basically the same governance that the Taliban has over Afghanistan, but in the United States of America. Like,
I think they got a lot in common.
Yeah,
they do.
So,
I think it's 9 out of 10.
But then in the United States of America, I'm sure you know plenty of religious people who are very tolerant, even if not literally pro-gay and pro-trans. Even there are non-denominational Christian churches, for example, that
we've
are
seen a lot of that. And I would apply. I want to make sure that, like, because I think a lot of times in conversations like this, there becomes like this othering of like Arabs or like Islam. I don't really see that as an othering. I think that there's a lot of overlap between Christianity and Islam, right? Okay. Especially in terms of like, you know, laws, etc., and things to believe. And I think that I would view a Christian, like one of these like super like religious zealot Christian people. I would
16% said Hitler had good ideas in Gen Z compared to 5% and people over 65. Interesting. Yes, you watched it live. Jesus Christ.
View them trying to push that on other people as the same type of basically inferior culture. I think that it is inferior. That's why we fought for years and years and years to get rid of it.
Okay, so yeah.
Yeah, listen, you know what? I think that this is it. This is the entire conversation. You have one perspective of Asmongold, like I said. He was looking to farm a based hot Twitter take when he dehumanized Palestinian people. Saying that their culture is inferior and the undertone is that they deserve the genocide. That's what his perspective is, which is obviously, in my opinion, him looking for attention, then coming into the conversation saying, well, what I really meant is I struggle with empathy for these people because they have a regressive, whatever, culture. And then Hasan just saying America bad over and over again. It's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. So let's go on to the next segment where we talk about Mudang, the baby hippo. Okay.